not. I apologize. Usually that's must listen, must watch programming for me. But I
What
missed it, Hugh. I apologize.
it was unusual that the Navy is abandoning 10-4 as the signal for understood. It
What
now
is
means
this, Hugh?
stand down. After the Green Bay Packers game, 10-4 means stand down. So he just said,
I walked right into that.
you
I
just,
thought Hugh, I thought we'd moved past this. Now I just got to shoot.
I thought Marines were, aren't Marines supposed to be situationally aware? How many
no,
weeks have I gotten you on this?
I just got fooled into doing an interview with Morning Joe where we were supposed to talk about the Global War on Terrorism Memorial, and they bait and switched it into some commentary about Senator Ron Johnson and this and that. So clearly, I'm just operating in good faith in an environment where everyone's trying to destroy me here.
10-4. Never trust them. 10-4 now means after that Packers game, stand down. So it no longer means understood.
Oh
Look,
gosh.
I did talk about the sea services yesterday with the Admiral, and I just looked at the new Armed Services Committee, Seapower Subcommittee. It's now a one-person subcommittee, right? If you get one Democrat to agree with the Republicans, you've got a majority on the subcommittee.
This is true. Although the subcommittee has always operated very much in bipartisan fashion, a tone that's set at the top with the collaborative approach that Joe Courtney and Rob Whitman have taken. And I actually think it is a model that the rest of Congress should pay attention to.
Well, Jim Cooper, who I didn't know was on it till I checked it this morning, is brothers with John Cooper, my friend for 45 years, now the mayor of Nashville. He's a very reasonable Democrat. My question to you is, have you guys had a conversation, and gals, about the next Secretary of the Navy? I was talking to Stavridis about this yesterday, and I think he would require a waiver to be the Secretary of the Navy. Maybe you'd give it to him, maybe you wouldn't. But we need someone who's got a good comprehensive grasp on sea strategy, don't we?
We have. I actually just had a conversation with my colleague Elaine Luria, who's a Democrat on the committee, who has extensive experience as a career naval officer, who knows more about these issues often than the people that are testifying before us on active duty in uniform. And we did talk a little bit about the future, not only the future of the Navy, but sort of about who the best SecNav might be going forward. I actually communicated directly to the White House in a call with Jake Sullivan how critical this position is. My view is that if you don't get this position right, someone who can really advocate forcefully for integrated American sea power, you're going to be hard pressed to implement the national defense strategy. You're going to be hard pressed to deter the Chinese Communist Party by denial. And so I think this is one of the key personnel appointments for the Biden administration going forward. Stavridis would be great. The waiver issue is an issue given that we had to exercise a waiver to get General Austin there as Secretary of Defense, a waiver which I opposed along with Senator Tom Cotton. But it's absolutely critical we get someone that not only understands the sort of internal dynamics of the Pentagon and the Navy, but can externally make the case directly to the American people as to why we need to invest in naval power, particularly given the unique geopolitical environment we find ourselves in right now.
Well, let's talk about that a second. I talked to Captain Hendricks yesterday, author of To Provide and Maintain, which is the monograph that is wildly spreading around the hill because it's only 150 pages, and Congressmen, even Wisconsinites, can be expected to read it. It makes the persuasive case for 450 ships, including submersibles. Do you think there's consensus on the Sea Power Subcommittee about that number?
Well, I don't think there's consensus on the 450 number, the Battle Force 2045 number. I think there was broad consensus on the 355 number, as evidenced by the fact that we made it a matter of U.S. law. We put it into NDAA that was the number we needed to aim at. I think there's still some lingering questions as to the more ambitious number, but Jerry's book is a great step in the right direction. Just the way he sort of describes sea power as democratic in nature. I mean, he argues that sort of monarchs and dictators throughout history viewed land as synonymous with power, and fear of this power led the framers of the Constitution to provide Congress with the power to raise an army but maintain a navy. And what's more, sea power in the Anglo-American tradition leads to this democratic concept of freedom of the seas, which in all nations, large or small, it means they enjoy equal rights to carry commerce over the high seas. So I think Jerry's book has really been a reminder to people like me who can tend to get lost in the weeds of the Navy that we really need to connect this argument for Battle Force 2045, for growing the fleet, to overarching American principles of defending the global commons and defending our democracy. That's what it's about at the end of the day.
So $1.9 trillion. It's so much money that if we actually spent it on the homeless, I did a exercise earlier this morning. If we took 10% of the stimulus rescue package that's on the table right now, we know that there are 567,000, according to the HUD count, people who are unhoused in America. You could spend $340,000 per person if you just took 10% of the stimulus. It's so much money. I don't believe any of it is going to the Navy. Am I right about that, Congressman Gallagher?
You're correct about that. But the good news is, $100 million is going to fund an underground rail project in Silicon Valley. And Chuck Schumer got a couple million for his Seaway Bridge project in New York. I'm thinking we got $60 billion that hasn't been spent, previously allocated for schools, and yet we're going to spend another $130 billion, money that's going to go to schools that is not going to be spent largely in this fiscal year, that's not going to be spent till 2022, 2023. Are we seriously suggesting that schools are still going to be shut down? And here's what happens when a dollar comes from the federal government and is allegedly allocated to schools. It has to go through what's called an LEA, a local educational authority. Think of your most dysfunctional school board. In our case in Wisconsin, it's Milwaukee Public Schools. They take an unspecified amount of that federal title money away from charter schools, private choice schools, in many cases to fund, non-merit based salary increases for teachers that haven't been working for a year. And that money, and then if that school wants to buy Chromebooks for kids that are doing distance learning, they have to do it through approved third-party vendors that mark up the price. There's a lot of ways in which these LEAs are stealing money from kids and parents who need it desperately right now. So this money's not even being used effectively to reopen schools. And it is a tragedy, Hugh, because we have so many priorities. And this $2 trillion bill is going to crowd out all our other priorities in what remains of this Congress, whether it's defense, whether it's a smart investment in infrastructure. Take your pick. I mean, it's going to be these two massive reconciliation bills that go down on purely partisan lines, and there's not going to be room for anything else. And that's a tragedy.
Well, I think about Georgia, which has two new Democratic senators and also one of the country's largest submarine bases. I think of Virginia, which has two Democratic senators and is the heart of American shipbuilding. I think of Maine with Angus King, who is your buddy. And I think of Pennsylvania and the Philadelphia shipyard with Senator Casey. Doesn't any of them realize you can upgrade these yards and these maintenance one-time expenditure? You can fund, actually, you could endow their expansion for a decade if they did anything remotely creative.
Well, you forgot about the mecca of American shipbuilding in Marinette, Wisconsin. So don't leave that out, Hugh, because that's the epicenter of everything.
But you got no Democrats left in Wisconsin.
This is true. This is true. But no, I know that there are particularly those like Angus King who understand this issue. I think we really need to give people a sense of urgency. And one of the things that strikes me is that as we've sat here for 4 years, Hugh, and talked about the need for a 355 ship Navy, well, the PLA Navy went out and built one.
And built it.
They have the largest Navy in the world with a battle force of over 350 ships. They're also the top ship producing nation in the world to buy tonnage. And when it comes time for one of those shipyards you mentioned to build a new dry dock to help repair naval vessels, often where those dry docks are built in China. Then they have to be cut into pieces and shipped back across the Pacific to the United States. In many cases, it's just a regular.
Look, we got a minute left. Where are the submersibles of the next century built, Congressman Gallagher? I have no idea where they're built.
Well, ideally, they'd be built in more places than just on the northeastern seaboard. I think one of the things that actually comes out in Jerry's book implicitly and at times explicitly is the need to diversify the shipbuilding industrial base. And I would like to see, selfishly, various locations on the Great Lakes that are used for unmanned undersurface vessel experimentation going forward, sort of next generation technology, and not just have subs built in one or two locations on the East Coast. As a matter of national security, we need to spread that production capacity out.
Understood. 10-3, Congressman, 10-3. We've got that. Good to see you, Congressman Mike Gallagher. Follow him at Rep Gallagher. I'll see if I can get him again next week. Honestly, tricking a Wisconsin person's not very hard. Don't go